The first sign that Bai Ning had returned was not a call, not a greeting, and not even a face. It was a message in our middle school alumni group at 7:12 in the morning sent, with the kind of confidence only a person with too much time and too little self-awareness could possess. After coming back from overseas, I suddenly realized the quality of every day. Life here is really worrying. I went out for a walk just now and could not even find proper sparkling water without sugar. Does anyone here normally drink artisan hydration? I stared at the words artisan hydration for a full 3 seconds before my coffee nearly went down the wrong way. The group was quiet. Then I typed, most of us drink water. It pairs well with rent. A few people immediately sent laughing emojis. Someone else asked whether artisan hydration meant water in a glass cup instead of a plastic one. The conversation could have ended there. A small morning joke tossed into the river of adult life. But Bai Ning had never known how to let anything stay small. She sent me a private message 10 minutes later. Long time no see, Manting. I forgot. People here may not understand the way we speak abroad. Don't feel embarrassed. If you want, I can explain it to you slowly. Then another one. By the way, I am still adapting after so many years overseas. Everyone there talks at a higher
frequency.
You know what I mean, right?
I knew exactly what she meant. Bai Ning had been like that at 14 too. Back then she did not have foreign words only. Imported pens, glossy notebooks, and a talent for finding the softest spot in another person's pride. She liked an audience. She liked seeing discomfort bloom on someone else's face. She especially liked aiming at people who could not afford to aim back. Some people grow out of that. Others simply upgrade the packaging. I put my phone face down and turned back to the report on my desk. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, evening light was sliding over the river, and the mirror towers across from my office. Inside, my assistant was still waiting for me to sign 3 cooperation agreements and a content budget for the next quarter. I was the founder of Lantern River Media, though very few people in my old class
Knew that.
years ago I had started with 5 people in a rented apartment editing short videos until dawn and convincing local shops to trust a 22-year-old girl with no famous surname and a bad chair. By the time short video platforms exploded, we were ready. We signed creators, built campaigns, launched brands, buried failed projects, and kept going. Now my company occupied 2 full floors and supported enough families that I no longer had the luxury of taking anything lightly, which was exactly why Bai Ning's nonsense annoyed me less than it amused me. When your days are filled with budgets, contracts, crises, and decisions that cost real money, a person who survives on borrowed glamour feels less like a threat than like static. I finished the report, rolled my neck, and thought that maybe I deserved a few days
Off!
My phone buzzed again. It was Bai Ning. Manting, what are you doing now? Don't tell me you're still in one of those ordinary office jobs. If you are, I might be able to give you some guidance. I have become somewhat visible online overseas, and I'm planning to expand my presence here.
I may need a local assistant.
There was a short pause and then another message. Arrived? Of course, if your conditions are too limited, I would not want to pressure you. I looked at that line and finally laughed. Out loud, somewhere between adolescence and adulthood, Bai Ning had apparently mistaken condescension for charisma. I replied, how thoughtful. If I ever need guidance on sparkling water and self-importance, I will ask. This time she took longer to respond. Manting, your humor is still very local. I muted the conversation and went home. The next morning, I woke to 37 new messages from a group I had never seen before. Bai Ning had created a second alumni chat and added nearly everyone from our old class, everyone except one person.
Tang Sui.
I noticed her absence immediately. In middle school, Tang Sui had been the girl Bai Ning targeted most often.
Tang.
Sui's father drove a tricycle hauling construction waste. Her mother sorted vegetables at the wholesale market before dawn. She wore uniforms let out at the seams, stitched exam paper covers onto old notebooks, and walked with the quiet concentration of someone who knew one wrong move could cost a week's peace. Bai Ning used to wave expensive pens in front of her and ask whether she had ever seen real stationery. Once she wrote on the blackboard, Tang Sui smells like poverty in huge chalk letters, and left before the teacher arrived. I had erased it. Tang Sui never thanked me. At the time, she only sat straighter all
Day, as if gratitude itself were a debt.
she could not afford. Now, all these years later, Bai Ning had created a new group and left her out. Again, the group name was Reunion Upgrade.
That
Alone should have warned everyone. Bai Ning opened with a voice message. Hi, everyone, I just got back and really miss my old classmates. Let us have a proper reunion, okay, but only with people who are at the right stage of life. Otherwise, the atmosphere gets awkward. No one answered right away. Finally, Xia, Yifeng, who had once been our class monitor and still possessed the patience of a monk, asked, why make a new group? The old class group already exists. Bai Ning replied, not everyone belongs in every room. Some people simply are not a match. Someone sent a question mark. Someone else privately messaged me, asking what exactly was wrong with Bai Ning. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I opened the old class group, found Tang Sui's profile, and sent her a message. Did you see the new group a few minutes later? She replied, I saw. It is fine. I'm working. The words were calm, but I could feel the old habit inside them, the instinct to withdraw first, so no one would have the pleasure of watching. I typed, if you want, I can pull you into another group with the normal people.
she.
Sent a laughing emoji. That afternoon, Bai Ning announced that she was organizing a class reunion at a very selective cultural venue and that everyone needed to transfer 200 yuan each for reservation coordination. People asked which place She refused to. Say, people asked what time. She said she would decide according to flow and mood. People asked whether those who could not attend still needed to pay. She answered, of course. This is not about whether you show up. This is about supporting the collective experience. When 3 classmates politely declined and did not send money, Bai Ning removed them from the group. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. The nerve was almost artistic. Then I saw the venue name she finally posted 2 days later. Ink Harbor. My eyebrows rose. Ink Harbor was not a restaurant. It was a book cafe and private salon tucked into a converted old house by the canal, a place known for tea, handmade, desserts, independent publishing events, and impossible reservations on weekends. It also belonged to Tang Sui. I looked at the address again, then called her. She picked up on the second ring.
Are you?
Hosting a class reunion this Saturday, I asked. There was a pause. Then Tang Sui laughed, once, very dryly. So that is what she told
You.
Bai Ning messaged me last week saying she wanted to support my business, asked for a room for an old classmate gathering, and promised everyone would consume normally. Did she pay a deposit? No, Tang Sui said. But she sent me a screenshot of a group chat and talked as if refusing her would make me look petty. I gave her the smallest private room. I could picture it already. Bai Ning, hair blown high by self-importance, treating someone else's work like a stage prop. Do you mind, I asked, if I come, Tang? Sui laughed again, and this time the sound was softer. I was going to ask you the same thing. Saturday evening arrived, damp and silver. The canal outside Ink Harbor held the last of the rain and broken ribbons of reflected light. Inside, the cafe glowed with warm lamps, dark wood, and the smell of tea, leaves warming in porcelain. When I entered, several classmates were already there. Shi Yifeng stood up first. He had put on weight in the comfortable, untragic way of a happily employed man. Beside him sat Lu Man, now a pediatrician, with the same steady eyes she had as a girl. One by one, faces connected themselves to old names, and for a brief, pleasant moment, I remembered why reunions were invented in the first place, not to compare, not to perform, but to reassure ourselves that the people who once saw us, unfinished, still existed somewhere in the world. Then Bai Ning arrived. She did not walk into the room so much as stage an entrance. She wore a black velvet dress too tight across the hips, high heels, better suited to a red carpet than a stone alley, and a jeweled headband that caught the cafe lights like a portable chandelier. A pale designer bag hung from her wrist, though I could tell at a glance from the stiff leather and the slightly bent logo that it was almost certainly a rental piece. Her eyes swept over the room, taking inventory. Wow, she said at last, smiling in a way that showed teeth but no warmth. I'm relieved. For a second, I worried some of you might actually come in. Everyday clothes. No one took the bait. She sat in the middle as if gravity itself had arranged the seats for her and began talking before anyone had asked her a single question. She had lived abroad for years, though she never clearly said where. She had fans, though she never named the platform. She had business offers, though she never specified from whom. She had standards, though evidence for those was notably absent. The more she spoke, the quieter the table became, not with admiration, but with the mute discipline of people too well brought up to laugh in someone's face. At one point, she glanced at me and asked,
Manting, what do you do these days still?
assisting someone, right, I could actually use a sharp local person. My current helper keeps buying the wrong breakfast. I took a sip of tea. I work in media, I said. Ah, she replied instantly.
So an
Assistant in some small creator studio.
that makes sense.
Across the table, Shi Yifeng nearly inhaled his soup. I let it pass. There is a particular kind of vanity that does not collapse when challenged. It needs room. It needs rope. It needs to be trusted with its own balance. The dishes began arriving. Tang Sui came in with one of her staff to check whether everything was all right. She wore a loose linen dress the color of raw paper, her hair tied back, her face bare except for lipstick. Time had sharpened her beauty instead of softening it. She did not look rich. She looked settled. That was rarer. Several classmates greeted her in surprise. Bai Ning turned, saw her, and for one brief second her expression emptied. Then the performance resumed.
Sui, she
Cried, standing up so quickly her chair scraped the floor. I knew this place had taste. Of course it would be yours.
You.
Never forget old friends, do you? Tang Sui looked at her for a long moment, and then smiled politely. Good evening, she said. The words were so neutral they could have wrapped a knife. Bai Ning, apparently, unable to hear tone through the static of her own ego, linked an arm through Tang Sui's for half a second before Tang Sui stepped back. I was just telling everyone, Bai Ning went on, that some people misunderstood me in school, but I always knew you would grow into something good. I saw Tang Sui's fingers tighten once around the menu in her hand, and I, Tang Sui said gently, always knew memory would remain useful. The room went very still. Bai Ning laughed too loudly and returned to her seat. Dinner might still have been salvaged after that if Bai Ning had possessed even a crumb of restraint, but she did not. She complained that the tea was too subtle, the desserts too small, the chairs too low, the playlist too melancholic, and the lighting bad for photographs. She took 23 pictures without asking anyone else whether they wanted to be in them. She ordered the most expensive single origin tea and then asked whether old friends could not waive the price. She referred to the waiter as Little Brother 3 times and snapped her fingers once when he did not hear her immediately. By the time the bill arrived, everyone had exhausted the polite version of themselves. The staff member placed the check folder near Bai Ning, since she had been the organizer and had collected everyone's money. She did not touch it. She lowered her eyes to her phone and began typing as if the bill were a weather event occurring in Another district. 1 minute passed, then 2. Finally, Xie Feng asked very evenly, Bai Ning, are you not paying? She looked up, genuinely offended.
Why would I pay the 200 each was?
The reservation contribution. That had nothing to do with dinner. There was a full second of silence in which even the rain outside seemed to pause and listen. Liu Man set down her chopsticks.
You said,
It was for the reunion. It was, Bai Ning replied. The reunion. Opportunity. Without me, could you even have gotten into a place like this? The waiter, poor man, still stood holding his service smile like a shield. Our cafe does not charge reservation fees, he said. Bai Ning turned to him with instant irritation. Did I ask you to speak? The waiter's ears reddened, but he did not move. Tang Sui stepped in then, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to alter the air. If there's confusion, she said, we can clear it up now. Bai Ning brightened in a blink.
exactly.
Sui, tell them, I brought everyone here for your business, did not I?
You should thank me.
Tang Sui picked up the bill, glanced at it, and then looked at Bai Ning.
I will.
Waive the room minimum, she said, because a few people here were kind to me. When kindness was expensive, but the meal still needs to be settled. Bai Ning's smile froze. Come on, she said.
We are old friends.
No, Tang Sui answered.
We are old. Classmates. Those are not the same thing. A sound escaped from somewhere around the table, half gasp, half satisfaction. Bai Ning's face shifted color. Then, as if she needed a fresh target to stay upright, she swung toward the waiter. I know exactly what this is, she said. Sharply. He has had an attitude with me all night. He kept staring. I'm the customer. And this is how you treat women. The accusation was so sudden, so ugly, that for a second no one moved. The waiter looked stunned. Tang Sui's expression changed. Not much. Just enough. We have cameras in every public area, she said. Bai Ning stood up.
You think I'm scared?
Of cameras, fine. Let us check them.
Let
Everyone see how your staff bullies guests. I watched her then with the odd calm that sometimes comes before a storm fully understands itself. She was not improvising.
this was instinct.
When cornered, she reached for whatever story would put her back in the center and make everyone else defensive. 12 years had passed. Her methods were exactly the same. I paid my own portion directly to the cashier. So did several others. One by one, we disentangled ourselves from the trap of Bai Ning's reservation, contribution, and the embarrassment she had built around it. By the end of the night, she had refunded every 200 yuan transfer with the expression of a woman being skinned alive. In polite installments, as she left, she leaned close to me and said under her breath, You always liked standing on the right side of things. It is very cheap. No, I said, meeting her eyes. Cheap is charging your old classmates an invented fee. Her face twitched. Then she left, crown glittering in the rain. If that had been the end, it would have become one of those reunion stories people tell for 2 months and then forget. But Bai Ning had never mistaken humiliation for a warning. She always treated it as a debt someone else owed her. The next afternoon, Tang Sui called me. She posted a video, she said. I opened the link she sent. It was already spreading. In the video, Bai Ning sat in a car, wearing oversized sunglasses and a pale cardigan, her voice trembling just enough to suggest authenticity without obstructing enunciation. Yesterday, I went to support a friend's small cultural business, she said. Instead, the male staff there kept approaching me, staring at me, pressuring me to consume, and humiliating me when I questioned the bill. The female owner sided with him because she thought I brought too much attention. I did not want to speak publicly, but women should not stay silent when they are mistreated. Then came a clipped shot of the waiter, holding the bill folder, cropped tight, enough to erase context. Then a shot of Tang Sui turning her head. Then Bai Ning's own hand over her mouth as if reliving trauma. By the time I reached the end, the video had already crossed 10,000 likes. Comments were rolling in.
So disgusting.
Protect women in service spaces. Small businesses always act superior once they get famous. Who is this owner? Expose her. That waiter is creepy just from his face. I felt my jaw set. The internet loves a wounded voice. It loves neat villains. It loves the satisfaction of moral certainty. Purchased at the price of 5 seconds of attention. Tang Sui had already pulled the surveillance footage. Send it to me, I said. She did. I stayed up that night with 2 members of my crisis team. By dawn, we had cut 3 videos. The first was the raw timeline from the cafe cameras, Bai Ning arriving, insulting the service, demanding free items, falsely claiming personal ties, refusing to pay, pointing at the waiter, and raising her voice first. The second was a statement from the waiter himself, recorded in clean light with no music, no filters, no theatrical pauses. He simply described what happened in order, named the times, and admitted what he had felt: confused, embarrassed, angry, and frightened that his face had been put online. The third was mine. Not emotional.
Not dramatic.
Just precise. I did not mention Bai Ning's history.
I
Did not mention school. I did not insult her. I spoke about selective editing, fabricated accusations, and the damage done when someone uses the language of women's safety as a costume to escape paying a bill and bearing consequence. We put money behind the posts.
You cannot.
Defend truth online with integrity alone. Not at first. First, you need reach. By mid-morning, the tide had shifted. By noon, it had turned. People slowed the surveillance clips down, matched angles, and circled the parts by. Ning had removed. Some pointed out that the harassment looked suspiciously like a waiter doing his job while being talked down to. Others noticed that Bai Ning's supporting a friend's business had begun with her, calling the owner a school friend, and ended with her trying to squeeze a free membership out of the place. Then other stories appeared.
One former
Classmate posted that Bai Ning had collected money from everyone for coordination and tried not to return it. Another woman from high school said Bai Ning had once spread rumors about her family because she wore the same coat 3 winters in a row. A former college roommate hidden behind a blank account, said Bai Ning regularly, rented luxury items to film my daily life videos and screamed at anyone who touched them. The internet, once it smells, contradiction is a very efficient animal. By evening, Bai Ning's follower count had begun to drop instead of rise. That might have been her chance to step back. Instead, she messaged Tang Sui an invoice for publicity contribution. I was sitting in Tang Sui's office when the message arrived. She showed me the screen. Bai Ning had typed with astonishing seriousness that, due to the attention she had unintentionally brought to Ink Harbor, the cafe now owed her a promotional service fee. She even included 3 tiers of influencer cooperation pricing and a deadline. Tang Sui read it twice and then looked at
Me?
Is this a psychiatric symptom? She
asked. I'm not qualified to diagnose, I said, but I am qualified to say she should never be near a contract unsupervised. We blocked her. For exactly 2 days, there was peace. Then a young woman named He Ching emailed my company. The subject line read, is Bai Ning from your agency. She took my money. Attached were screenshots of a beautifully designed PDF with Lantern River Media's
logo, a fake cooperation stamp, and Bai
Ning's photo in a cream suit. The program advertised Global Elegance Lab, a 6-week transformation course for girls who wanted to break into influencer circles, luxury retail, or overseas social media. It promised media coaching, foreign etiquette training, high-end photo shoots, connections to cultural venues, and priority recommendation to content
Agencies.
The fee was 12,000 yuan.
The
Deposit for borrowed styling pieces was another 15,000. 3 girls had already paid. He Ching wrote that all in-person sessions had been postponed twice. The studio address turned out to be a rented meeting room used by the hour. 1 girl's ID had been taken to help with brand registration. Another had been persuaded to open a new buy now pay later account for portfolio styling equipment. Nobody had received receipts. Nobody had met any real staff. And now Bai Ning was not answering. I read the email once, then again more slowly. This was no longer vanity.
This was
Appetite? I called He Ching immediately and asked her not to contact Bai Ning again. Then I called Tang Sui. Then my legal director. By evening, we had 4 more complainants. By the next afternoon, we had 8. The pattern was always similar. Bai Ning approached women younger than herself, usually with ordinary backgrounds and visible insecurity. She praised them. First, she said they had untapped temperament. She hinted that ordinary lives were choices made by people without imagination. She promised access not to skill, not to work, but to a different social altitude. Then came the deposits. Then the rental accounts. Then the silence. 1 girl, only 19, cried on the phone while telling me Bai Ning had looked through her family's apartment photos and said, you must want to escape this kind of life. That sentence did something hot and immediate to my blood. I knew Bai Ning's type of cruelty well. It always began with desire, not your own, someone else's. She watched what a person longed for and used it as a doorway. We gathered evidence for 3 days. Screenshots, transfers, voice messages, the forged PDF with my company's logo, fake letter inviting applicants to Ink Harbor cultural collaboration events, signed with Tang Sui's name, rental, platform records tied to IDs she had collected, messages sent past midnight to a married real estate investor who appeared to be financing at least part of Bai Ning's current lifestyle. When my legal director saw the whole file, he whistled softly. She thinks pretty things cancel ugly math, he said. I went to the police with He Ching and 2 other girls the next morning. Bai Ning was arrested 48 hours later in the lobby of a service department building, wearing a silk blouse she did not own and trying to check out before the next day's rental fee kicked in. The married investor did not show up for her. His wife did. That part, I learned later from the case file, was spectacular. The wife had already been tracking him quietly for months. Bai Ning's messages, photos, and payments slid into her hands like wet cards. By the time Bai Ning was taken in for questioning on fraud and document forgery, the wife had already frozen the man's supplemental account and hired her own lawyer. Whatever fantasy Bai Ning had been living in, it did not include being abandoned by the very money she thought made her untouchable. I should say here, for honesty's sake, that I did not feel noble during those
weeks.
I felt focused. I felt satisfied. Sometimes, late at night, I felt almost peaceful because for the first time in many years, Bai Ning's chaos was no longer something people around her simply had to absorb. It had shape now. Names, dates,
victims.
signatures, evidence, law. At the preliminary hearing, Bai Ning wore no makeup. Her hair was tied back so tightly it seemed to pull the rest of her Face upward in resistance, without the practiced expressions, without the costume of superiority, she looked younger and older at the same time, like a person who had spent too much of life acting and suddenly discovered there was no one left to applaud. She saw me in the corridor and stopped. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You always hated me." It was such a childish sentence, so insufficient for the architecture of harm she had built that I almost did not
Answer.
I did not think about you that much, I said. That was the problem. Everyone kept moving around you instead of through you. She stared. Then she laughed once, a short, broken sound.
Easy for you, she said.
You were always.
Fine.
No, I replied.
I just stopped.
Confusing being looked at with being
Alive.
Her mouth tightened. She turned away. First, in court, the story grew larger. Then even I had known. The prosecution laid out the forged documents, the deposits, the unpaid rentals, the identity accounts opened under other people's names, and the staged photographs used to market a life Bining could not afford. The married investors' transfer records were produced. So were the messages she had sent to girls full of poison wrapped in aspiration. A dream package, one lawyer called it. Ladder made of mirrors. Tang Sui testified about the forged collaboration letter and the false accusations after the reunion. I testified about the fake use of my company's name and the direct financial damage to the girls who had trusted those papers. King testified too. She cried twice, apologized for crying, and kept going. Bai Ning's defense tried to paint her as merely reckless, socially vain, eager to succeed, overly dependent on Image. But Image had not transferred the money. Image had not forged the stamp. Image had not taken IDs, opened accounts, threatened girls into silence, or tried to invoice a restaurant she had slandered. The judge, an older woman with a spare, level voice, said something I have never forgotten.
Vanity is not a crime, she said.
But teaching others to mortgage themselves to your vanity while you knowingly lie. Forge and profit is not vanity. It is predation. When the sentence came down, Bai Ning did not cry immediately. She sat very still, as if the body too can refuse reality for half a minute if it wants badly enough. Only when the bailiff touched her elbow did she twist toward the gallery and start shouting at the court, at the girls, at Tang Sui, at me, at fate, at the world for refusing the version of herself she had tried so hard to sell. No one shouted back. That, more than the sentence, seemed to strip the last of her glamour away. Life moved on, because it always does. Ink. Harbor became harder to book than ever. Though now for reasons Tang Sui actually deserved. She expanded into the adjacent building 2 years later and added a reading room upstairs with low lamps and long tables, where students could stay as long as they liked for the price of one pot of tea. Once, when I asked her why she kept the
Student discount so generous, she said.
because someone should, Lantern River Media continued growing.
I
Took fewer vanity creators and more people with actual skill. Somewhere along the line, I became the kind of employer who noticed when a young woman apologized too much in meetings or when a candidate kept saying she was ordinary, as if preparing to be thrown away. I started a small scholarship with Tang Sui's reading room for girls from county schools who wanted training in design, editing, and digital work. We never called it charity. We called it entry. As for the old alumni group, it slowly quieted again. People got promoted. Parents got sick. Children were born. Mortgages were paid and regretted. Friendships thinned or thickened according to use. Now and then, someone would mention Bai Ning in the tone people reserve for former storms, dramatic once, distant now. Years later, I saw her name one last time on a background check attached to a temporary hire request from a subcontracted cleaning service. It took me a second to connect it to the face on the file. The woman in the ID photo looked exhausted. In the deep, mineral way exhaustion can carve itself into a person. The makeup was gone. The posture was gone. Even the resentment seemed tired. There was only a flatness there, as if life had finally become too heavy to decorate. I did not intervene. Not out of mercy.
Not.
Out of cruelty. Simply because, by then, I no longer believed every ending needed my gaze on it to become real. A week after that, Tang Sui and I sat upstairs in the reading room after closing. Rain pressed softly against the
Old window panes.
downstairs. Someone had forgotten a scarf over the back of a
chair.
A student had left notes in the margin of a poetry book and slipped a page marker into it like a small apology. Tang Sui poured tea for both of us. Do you ever think, she asked, that if we had all ignored her from the beginning, things would have been different? I thought about it. Outside, car lights moved along the canal like slow fish.
No, I said at last.
I think she spent years surviving on the distance between performance and consequence. Eventually, something was going to close that distance. Tang Sui nodded. Then she smiled, very slightly, and we just happened to be standing there. When it did, I lifted my cup. To standing there, I said. She touched hers against mine. To living well enough that other people's ugliness does not become your reflection. That night, when I drove home through the
Wet city, I thought about the girls who
had paid Bai Ning because they wanted to be remade. I thought about the girl Tang Sui used to be sitting stiff, backed at a wooden desk, while someone laughed at the hems of her sleeves. I thought about my own younger self, so certain that success meant never needing anything, never being embarrassed, never Being caught looking small, age had taught me a better definition. Real abundance is not rented.
It does not.
Need an accent. It does not ask to be believed every 5 minutes. It is the freedom to remain calm while glitter peels off someone else's lies. It is the ability to pay your own bill, sign your own name, and walk away from a table without having stolen anyone's dignity to sit there. And if, from time to time, life lets you watch a cruel person choke on the shine they use to blind others, well, there are worse ways for justice to look. What I have not told you yet is that Ning never really wanted luxury. Luxury, at least the real kind, comes with discipline. It requires taste, patience, bills paid on time, and enough inner quiet not to wave it around like a knife. What Ning wanted was hierarchy.
She
Wanted to stand one stair above the nearest person and hear the difference in their breathing. In middle school, that stair had been a fountain pen from Japan. In college, it became photos taken in hotel lobbies where she was never actually staying. In adulthood, it became a fake accent, rented bags, and a talent for turning other people's longing into a receipt. I understood that more clearly during the week after the reunion because Ning did not stop contacting me. She could not help herself. Every silence around her became something she had to scratch until it bled. At 2 a.m, she sent me a screenshot of a draft cooperation proposal from some tiny cosmetics account and wrote, "See, brands are still looking for
me.
This is how people at my level work.
You probably do not understand because you are behind the scenes." At 8 a.m, she sent 3 voice messages explaining that the class reunion had actually been a social experiment to test who among us still possessed enough upward energy to deserve future contact. I did not answer any of it, but I did begin quietly checking. Her public accounts were smaller than she had implied, but not non-existent. She had just enough followers to make lies look plausible and just enough engagement to seduce people who had never worked in media into thinking numbers were truth. Most of her videos had the same ingredients: hotel corridors, elevators with brass walls, captions about refinement, lectures about boundaries, and short clips of luxury objects handled the way some people hold religious items, reverently, greedily, and without permission. There were no real collaborations, no meaningful brand history, no stable visual identity, no audience loyalty, only the same fantasy, told in different lighting. My team had rejected her application
Months earlier for exactly those reasons.
She had submitted a portfolio full of stolen aesthetics, inflated numbers, and a cover letter that used the phrase global, feminine, premium, energy 3 separate times without once saying what she could actually do. I remember my assistant standing in my office with the file. She has confidence, the assistant had said carefully. So does a gas leak, I replied. We had a decline. At the time, I did not know I would meet that confidence again over tea and false accusations. Tang Sui and I ended up spending more time together in those days than we had in the previous decade. After the first wave of public backlash, we sat in her upstairs storage room among boxes of books and packaged tea, eating
Sesame crackers because neither of us had
remembered dinner.
Do you know what annoys me most? She
Asked. That she breathes? I said. Tang Sui laughed despite herself then. Shook her head. No. That even now, when she lies, there are still people willing to think maybe she has a point.
not.
Because the evidence supports her. Just because she says things like she belongs to a better world. I knew what she meant. Confidence, when performed by the right face in the right clothes, often gets mistaken for credibility. In school, Bai Ning used to say things in a tone so assured that teachers sometimes half believed her before checking.
She
Once accused Tang Sui of stealing a set of imported highlighters. The highlighters were later found in Bai Ning's own desk, but by then Tang Sui had already been searched in the office. Her school bag turned out in front of 2 teachers and a janitor. No formal apology ever came. Tang Sui merely had to go on living after being looked at like a person who might take what glittered because her life contained too little glitter on its own.
It took me years, Tang Sui said quietly.
Not to flinch when someone richer than me smiled too nicely. I turned the cracker in my hand and thought about how long harm stays in the body even after the facts have been corrected. What got you through it? I asked.
she
Looked around at the shelves
work, she said.
and spite, mostly spite. In the beginning, after graduation, she had worked in a stationery shop by day and a milk tea place by night. She saved until her fingers cracked. She bought secondhand books by the kilo because libraries threw them out and no one else wanted philosophy textbooks with notes in the margins. She rented a room over an old watch repair stall and started hosting weekend reading sessions there. The room became 2 rooms, then a ground floor, then the old canal house that became Ink Harbor. Everything in the place had been earned in increments so small that losing any of it to someone like Bai Ning would not only hurt, it would feel insulting to time
itself.
No wonder she had not cried when Bai Ning lied. She had built too much to dissolve that cheaply. The investigation into the fake global elegance lab widened faster than any of us expected. Once the first girls were willing to speak, others seemed to realize all at once that shame is usually just fear in expensive makeup. One of them, a girl named Miao Yu, came to my office in person. She wore a carefully ironed blouse, held her phone in both hands, and apologized 4 times before sitting down. I know this sounds stupid, she said. Please do not laugh. I promised I would not. She showed me the messages. Bai Ning had found her under a video about county girls trying to work in big cities. First she praised Miao Yu's face shape. Then she said the girl's posture was tragically rural but fixable. Then she sent a voice note saying that with the correct styling, accent, and social guidance, Miao Yu could completely change the kind of life that was available to her. She even sent examples of students she had helped, girls in hotel robes and soft focus lighting whose photos were clearly taken on the same 2 afternoons. In the same rented rooms, Miao Yu had borrowed the money for the course from her older sister, who was saving for a wedding.
She told me not to tell my family, Meow.
Yu said, eyes on the floor. She said, ordinary people sabotage transformation because they are frightened of anyone around them changing rank. The sentence was so perfectly by Ning that I felt something inside me settle. Predators repeat themselves because repetition works. Another girl, 20 years old, had been instructed to purchase skincare and accessories on installment plans under the excuse that brands only notice girls who invest in their future image. The products were shipped not to her, but to an address by Ning provided. The girl was told this was temporary, that the items would be used in a shared shoot. Of course, she never saw them again. When we traced the parcels, several had been delivered to luxury item consignment
Stores.
Bai Ning was not just borrowing shine anymore. She was melting other people's hope down for resale. Tang Sui obtained the guest records from a small lifestyle studio Bai Ning had rented twice for courses. The owner remembered her because she never paid deposits on time and once tried to argue that posting the space on social media counted as compensation. There had been no classes, only photo sessions. One afternoon with a borrowed photographer. One afternoon with girls told to bring white outfits and stand against blank walls while Bai Ning talked about becoming her own passport. I almost admired the efficiency of the scam. There is good money in selling humiliation back to the people who suffer from it, provided you rename it
Aspiration.
The married investor's role became clearer, too. His secretary, terrified by the possibility of being implicated, quietly passed along records showing repeated transfers labeled project support and
Venue expenses.
venue expenses had indeed been paid, but mostly to places Bai Ning used as backdrops for a life she did not lead. Project support had funded hotel stays, rented cars, and the infamous gown she wore to the reunion, the one she later returned late and stained with red wine. When Tang Sui heard that last detail, she actually put her head down on the table and laughed until she cried. Imagine, she said, wiping her face, destroying a borrowed dress while trying to make old classmates feel poor. She has range, I said. She has disease, Tang Sui corrected. During that week, Bai Ning also tried a final ridiculous maneuver. She sent my company a formal-looking email claiming Lantern River Media had verbally promised to consider her for a strategic partnership and that the public dispute with Ink Harbor had damaged her personal commercial valuation. The email demanded compensation or written clarification of our relationship. My legal team printed it and pinned it on the meeting room wall for an hour, so everyone could enjoy it. Then we answered with a one-line statement. We have no cooperation with Ms. Bai Ning, have never authorized her to represent our company and reserve all rights regarding forged documents and false commercial claims. Clean. Final. Errorless. It was after that response that she escalated from performative stubbornness into visible panic. She changed her usernames twice, deleted 43 videos, posted a crying apology that somehow avoided admitting to any specific act, then deleted the apology because commenters kept asking about the forged documents and missing deposits. The girls she had recruited created a group chat of their own and began comparing notes. For once, Bai Ning was the one being discussed in a room she could not control. I was added to that group only to answer practical questions: how to preserve chat records, how to timestamp transfers, how to avoid being manipulated into private settlement without written terms, how to respond if Bai Ning or her associates threatened them. The girls were nervous, embarrassed, and much younger than their pain made them. Sound. One typed at 1:13
I feel stupid.
Another girl answered before I could. She
Chose us because we were serious, not
because we were stupid. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I copied it into my notes app. There are truths you want to keep where you can reach them later. By the time the police formally detained Bai Ning, she had already burned through most of her performance options. She could not cry convincingly because the records were too concrete. She could not act superior because even her supposed superiority had been financed by other people. She could not convincingly claim misunderstanding because her own voice messages were full of instructions, pressures, and manipulations too specific to mistake. Still, even cornered, she tried to narrate herself upward. One officer later told me she kept saying the girls had paid to buy a more advanced mentality, that she had only accelerated their education. She called herself a mentor 3 separate times in the first hour of questioning. A mentor, the officer had said. Then he slid the forged stamp across the table. This is what you use to educate. When the case made local news, something interesting happened. The public did not divide the way it had during the restaurant dispute. Perhaps because money leaves clear bruises than reputation. Perhaps because the victims were young women with ordinary faces and frightened voices instead of a poised business owner and a waiter people could more easily dismiss. Perhaps because society is still more comfortable defending girls from fraud than from humiliation. Whatever the reason, sympathy flowed quickly this time. The comments filled with warnings about vanity traps, fake mentorship, class anxiety, and the cruelty of people who build ladders for others only so they can charge by the wrong. A columnist even wrote that the real product Bai Ning had sold was not elegance, but permission to look down on the life you already had. That line was quoted so often it became a kind of public shorthand for the whole scandal. I sent the article to Tang Sui.
She
Replied permission should never be that expensive. When the trial date was set, Bai Ning's lawyer approached mine with an offer. If the girls would withdraw certain Allegations, and if Tang Sui and I would issue statements softening the public.
Narrative, Binding was willing to write.
Letters of apology and partially reimburse. The smallest deposits first. My legal director read the proposal and asked me whether I wanted coffee before he declined it. No, I said. I want precision. So, precision is what we sent. No private settlement without full restitution. No ambiguity on the forged documents. No separate treatment for the victims with smaller losses.
No public
Statement implying misunderstanding where there had been design. If Binding wanted leniency, she would have to ask the court, not the women she had used. That answer ended the approach. The trial itself lasted less than the rumors around it, which is often the way with consequences. Drama consumes weeks. Evidence takes only the time required to
name it.
Still, there were moments that remain bright in my memory. He Ching standing straighter with each answer. Tang Sui refusing to look at Binding even once. While testifying, the judge adjusting her glasses and asking very mildly if your course was genuine. Why did you instruct participants not to tell their families Binding, saying families often do not understand growth. The prosecutor replying growth does not require fake company seals. At one point, Binding tried to redirect blame toward the married investor, saying he had encouraged her, that he liked ambition, that he understood the importance of image in modern life. The prosecutor asked, did he also encourage you to take 18-year-olds ID photos and open rental accounts under their names? For the first time all morning, Binding had no immediate answer. That silence did more than any accusation. It showed the room what she looked like. When language failed her, not grand, not tragic, just frightened and ordinary. The sentence she received was not the longest possible, but it was heavy enough to mark a life. Heavy enough that when the courtroom emptied, the girls sat in the corridor and cried with the violent exhaustion of people whose bodies had been braced for too long. I stayed with them until they stopped, apologizing for the tears. Afterward, I used my company's legal fund to help 3 of them unwind the identity, damage, and debt accounts Binding had helped create.
Tang Sui quietly hired one
of the girls part-time in the reading
room.
Another joined a design training program we paid for. None of this repaired what had happened, but repair is not a door. It is carpentry. You go plank by plank. Months passed. The scandal should have ended there, but Binding's name surfaced again when the married investor's wife filed her own civil suit around transferred gifts, diverted funds, and reputational harm. More messages were released. More of Binding's false intimacy. Strategic desperation and midnight bargaining spread into public view. If there had still been anyone who believed she was simply misunderstood, that belief did not survive the screenshots. At that point, even pity for her became tiring. She had not been destroyed by one mistake. She had invested in destruction, diversified it, and called the portfolio ambition. When the temporary cleaning service file landed on my desk years later, I recognized none of that old ferocious vanity in the photograph. Only damage, only fallout, the kind that reaches the bone and then settles there. Part of me wondered whether she had recognized me when she requested special consideration. Another part of me did not care. The day I declined to interfere, I went downstairs to the studio floor and watched a junior editor rehearse a pitch to a creator who had grown up in a county town and still bowed too much when introduced to clients. The editor spoke gently, clearly, without superiority. The creator gradually relaxed. In 10 minutes, she became visibly more herself. That, I remember thinking, is what real access looks like. Not a door with a liar in front of it. A room where no one needs to shrink before speaking. Later that same week, I visited Tang Sui's reading room again. A group of high school girls had taken over the long table near the window with mock exams, tea, and a giant bag of sunflower seeds someone had smuggled in despite the rules. Their laughter moved through the room like warm air. Tang Sui watched them too. Sometimes, she said quietly, I think the cruelest thing Binding ever did was not the words themselves. It was making girls believe they needed her kind of life to deserve respect. I nodded. And the best revenge, I said, is building places where that lie stops.
Working.
She smiled at that and topped up my tea. We never spoke of Binding again after.
That evening,
Not because the past disappeared,
Not
because forgiveness arrived in a white dress and solved everything. Only because some people, once consequence has finally named them, no longer get to keep renting space in your mind. Even now when I remember her, I do not think first of the courtroom or the lies or the glittering headband at the reunion. I think of the moment she saw the bill and tried to turn humiliation into accusation. I think of the message demanding money from the restaurant she had tried to ruin. I think of He Ching saying, I feel stupid. And another girl answering, she chose us because we were serious. That is what remains useful. The lesson is never that cruelty wins. For a while, of course it does. Sometimes it
wins loudly.
The lesson is that cruelty nearly always depends on unpaid labor from the people around it. Silence, deference, confusion, second chances, politeness, self-doubt. Once enough people stop paying that bill, the whole structure begins to wobble. Bye. Ning did not fall because she was flashy. She fell because too many women finally refused to hold up the staircase for her. And I, for one, have always preferred justice that arrives wearing ordinary shoes.